You just did your thing. Starting over. That was just a dress rehearsal. We're so sorry about that. I am Nikki Triumfo. You're here with 50 First Chapters. Once this is a video, some of you will be coming for the first time. This is...
I am Charlie Holmberg,
author
of the Paper Magician series.
Thank you. And you guys who have been watching the whole time, I am so sorry. I accidentally killed the broadcast. It was all my fault.
Nikki isn't good with technology.
Well, in my defense, YouTube changed everything.
They did.
And then... Not that that's really a good defense, but anyway. Okay, so for those of you who have been watching a little bit, go get another drink break or something, because we're going to go over a little bit of what we just went over so that once it's a video, we can, I don't know. Plus, we don't even know where it stopped. I think it was only like 2 minutes. Okay, all right. So tell us a little bit about your book to start out with so that we can get a baseline on that.
So The Paper Magician is...
This is your first book. This
my
is your
very first,
debut.
my debut book, yes. It's about an alternate Edwardian England where people have learned how to do magic with man-made materials such as...
What time period is Edwardian?
It starts in 1902.
Okay.
So a lot of people say it's Victorian. It technically isn't, because she died like 2 months before the book started.
Got it.
So they learn how to do magic with man-made materials such as glass, plastic, rubber, paper.
Right.
And it follows Seanie Twill here on the cover, who has just graduated from a rigorous magic prep school and has been forced into paper magic because paper magic is the lame magic that nobody else wants. There's only a dozen paper magicians left in England. And so she's forced into this apprenticeship under this really eccentric mentor. And she's heartbroken because... She wants to be a smelter. She wants to be a metal alloys magician. And a few weeks into her apprenticeship, a strange woman bursts into her mentor's home and literally rips his heart from his chest, and it's up to her to get it back.
Hopefully before he dies.
Before he dies.
Which
most of us
don't
have a paper replacement. The paper heart doesn't last.
So cute. I love that. Okay, so that's a little bit about Charlie, and you guys already know enough about me, so I'm not going to talk about me anymore. Okay, we're going to structure this talk a little bit around Save the Cat. It's a wonderful, awesome book about screenwriting, but also it's just about storytelling in general. And
it's great for plot building.
Yeah.
If you ignore the page numbers. He's like, do this by page 5. In a novel, that's actually page like 15.
Yeah, I just multiplied each thing by like 4 or something.
Really?
Yeah. You
just
threw it out the window.
I don't do that. I don't
forget it. So you guys can't really see this, but here it has a list of 15 things that you want to get to in your plot, and you want to go in order, and you want it to come. Yeah, you want it to come at fairly regular intervals. So the first thing is an opening image. So you're going to show the world the way that it was before, so that you can show it after in a better way. So the original world and the final world are going to look exactly the same, except for the few things that are kind of broken in the original are going to be fixed at the end, so that we can have a sense of resolution.
Think The Matrix.
Yes. This is like deja vu. It's like we've already said that. So in The Matrix, the problem is...
What's the character's name?
I don't remember. I have never seen it. Remember?
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves is living in this regular world that's totally normal to him, and because he doesn't know about the computers harvesting his brain. And in the end, he's still in that normal world, but now he's flying around because he knows how to manipulate it and he knows how to hack into the system. So they're the same image, but they're vastly different in that sense.
Right, because of what the knowledge that he has. In other words, the thing that's broken.
What he's gained throughout the story.
Right, and so a lot of the opening of a story, we think of the opening of a story as wanting, of course you want it to be interesting, you want it to be action-packed, you want it to be maybe all of these things, you want it to have a hint of romance, whatever. But what you're actually trying to really show is you're showing an original world that's interesting, that has some things that are flawed. And you have to show those before you get to the action events, or else we don't know what we're trying to fix.
Especially if you're at fantasy.
Yeah, you, the author, think it's so cool, the action that's happening, because it's pressing to this great new world. But the reader hasn't seen enough maybe of the original world to care. And so that's why Blake Snyder says you got to start in the original world. And it's not just Blake Snyder. I mean, Joseph Campbell, pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
The original world, that's where you start.
Basically, the reader needs to know why the catalyst matters and what the catalyst means.
Right. And obviously, most literature today centers on a very, very focal point main character. So when we say the opening image, it's usually of that main character. It's not just the world. The main character is included part of that. Okay, and so a setup is what's going on. We got to see the world enough to see what's broken in that world. So in the setup of the Matrix, he's walking around and give us a sense of the setup.
It's been so long since I've seen that movie, though. That's the thing.
But basically, though, he doesn't know.
He has like deja vu moments. He sees glitches. Like he looks and there's like a cat walking down the alley. He looks again and the same cat's walking down the alley. Like he sees glitches. So he starts to know something's off. So he starts to think that maybe there's something about his world that maybe something isn't the way that it's like a little seed, and then
right.
What's his face coming in?
The pills. I gotta go see that. Everyone, at the time it was rated R. When it first came out, and I was like 15, and that was the thing back then. So anyway, I'm sure it's a thing for some people as well. Okay, theme and inner conflict. You probably already know what that is, but basically it's about it's encompassing that it's a sentence that encompasses that what's wrong.
The theme stated,
and so and then a catalyst is what throws you into a new world where you're going to experiment with other ways to change what's broken.
It's what starts your story. We argue about what the catalyst means.
Right. But the catalyst, I mean, the way you think of it is the catalyst basically takes you into Act 2 where you're going into a new world.
The way I think of it, the catalyst is what starts, like something changes to make the plot happen, and then Act 2 is when you actually step into the next world.
Right. And so so your agent, it was your agent or your editor?
My editor had me add 2 chapters.
Okay, so your editor wanted you to take a little bit longer actually to get to the new world.
So the catalyst and
what was your page count before? Because your book's pretty short.
It's only 212 pages long.
So before that it would have only been like 170.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Interesting, or like 180 or something, but that's pretty short.
Yeah, I think we added like 4,000 words.
Got it.
So in my book, my catalyst actually happens pretty late, considering it's a kind of a YA-NA book. It happens in chapter 5.
Where is this in the library? Is this in? Oh, it is.
I think they put it in YA.
Oh, they do? This one they don't. It's just fiction. It doesn't say YA fiction.
Yeah, it says Reader's Choice. Anybody in the Salt Lake area?
Nice. Yay! So, is this one of the ones you can vote on?
Yeah.
I tried to vote on those, and I just voted random people, and they're like, no, it has to be one of the people on the.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even look at it. I should look at yours. That's cool. I will do that. Okay. That's fine. We'll have to ask about that later. But hey, why don't you go through before we talk about catalyst? Why don't you tell us your opening image, your setup, your theme? Just go in order.
Okay. That's fine. So the opening image of my book it starts with seeing Twill getting out of a car and looking up at this place where she's going to have to do an apprenticeship for 2 to 6 years. And she is really unhappy about it because she's just been, like a week before, been told, guess what, all your dreams are dashed, you have to do paper magic.
Right.
And she steps out of this car and she looks up at this dilapidated, reeking mansion, and she just thinks, my life is over. This is awful. So that's like the very opening image.
Right.
The theme,
I believe she said, I stepped into hell.
She's like, I've been shot to hell.
I've been shot to hell. Yes, that's good.
And so the theme stated is actually the second piece of dialogue. She's with her mentor, who is the one who forced her into this magic. And the mentor basically tells her, don't always trust what your eyes see.
Right.
And that is proved just on the first page, because as soon as she steps past the fence, this awful mansion turns into this humble-looking cottage, because it was all a paper illusion that was making it look that way.
Right. It was magic.
The catalyst, or the inciting incident of the book, is when she's been studying with magician Thane for about 3 weeks, and they're sitting down to dinner, and this strange woman just bursts into his house, you know, does her evil person monologue, and she literally puts her hand into his chest and rips his heart out and leaves with it.
Right.
So that's when, oh, things
kind of a major
real.
twist.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, oh my gosh. And Simi crafts him a paper heart, which isn't going to last very long. She's only been doing paper magic for 3 weeks anyway. And so the Act 2, which is when the worlds change, she goes from one world really into the other, is when she actually leaves the cottage with the mission of, I'm going to get his heart back before the paper fails.
Right. But the original world is a mirror of the new world in a lot of ways. So like in your original world, she's working with paper and she's learning to become a magician. And in the new world, she's also working with paper and learning to become a magician. That's a huge part of the plot, is her learning, but now it's real. You know, before it was all practice. Evil that she's heard about in the past is now suddenly in her face. But yeah, now like the stakes are super high. And so a lot of times people, when they think about going into the new world, they maybe overcomplicate it, especially if it's a simple kind of story, like a romance or a mystery or something like that. You're basically going to be doing the same thing, like where 1 minute you were doing a romance, the next minute you were also doing a romance. There just has to be a little twist to it. You know, it has to feel more real. The stakes have to be higher, something like that. Yeah, you can think of the going into Act 2 as the protagonist's reaction to the inciting incident. And the thing that Blake Snyder says that I totally agree with is that your protagonist really needs to choose to take that step into world number 2 and not just be forced into it, because otherwise you have a very passive character. And I think, and I shouldn't have put it here so casually, catalyst and inciting incident. I think maybe, and again, this is just definitional, but I think that's the difference. Catalyst to me is something that happens right before Act 2. Inciting incident, you can actually think of that as happening in the first chapter. And that's not sending them into the new world necessarily. Does that make sense? Like inciting incident for you, in my opinion, it's not like she just shows up and she's sworn in to this paper magic and it's completely normal. The inciting incident for me, for you, like in your
sub-catalyst.
Yeah. Well, it's not, I mean, you can, I don't know, I think I should break that up and have it be 2 different things. You know, he doesn't really talk about inciting incident. It's not really a thing, but they don't, or I'm sorry, that was supposed to be Save the Cat. Yeah, I was supposed to be doing Save the Cat. He doesn't really talk about inciting incident, but because books are built into chapters, I don't know, I think that today's reader does expect a lot from a first chapter. Yeah, and when you get to that chapter,
especially if you write,
yeah, if you don't have anything that makes them want to turn that page and go on to the next thing, then they don't have faith maybe that each of your chapter hooks will provide the same. And so I think your book would have been a lot less strong if you had her not. If she had been wanting to do paper magic and then she was sworn into paper magic, there wouldn't be a lot going on because there's no conflict. Yeah, and also it was too expected. There's nothing, there's no difference. How do I say this? She had a vision of how her life was going to be, and then she had to make a choice right in the first chapter. Am I going to pursue that vision, or am I going to take what fate is giving me? And she made the choice, and the choice was permanent by the end of chapter 1. And so it feels like heavy. It feels like a lot. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So now, if you guys don't have this, this is your handout, and hopefully you'll have to go back to the old link to get it. Just go to my blog. Hopefully most of you know where that is. Okay.
YikiTryOnCo.com.
Yes, yeah, which is really easy to spell, and I'm sure you'll figure that out. So we're going to just go over Pride and Prejudice really fast to give you another example. So the opening image of Pride and Prejudice is a bunch of single women sitting around in their house talking about men in a theoretical sense and marrying men and how their marriage is so important for their financial security, for their emotional and their romantic security, whatever. And so so the setup is that these two guys have, or I guess at the beginning you only know there's one, but somebody rich has moved in and he's young and he's not married. And so obviously some of the women think it's silly to imagine that everyone will try to marry him. But at the same time, you know that everyone's going to try to marry him because that's a huge part of their security is marriage. So anyway, the theme and inner conflict is said in the title. That's Pride and Prejudice. That's pretty easy. The inciting incident, I think, if you think of it in terms of what happens only in the first chapter, is probably just that the men have already moved in. So it's not, they're not talking about the theoretical world of who they're going to marry and nothing has happened. It's like some guy has already been there. It's a romance. We're pretty sure something's going to happen there. So we're given a pretty strong hint that we're at least going to meet the guy. Even though it's funny because they're talking the whole time about how they're never going to meet the guy. But you know, I mean, you know that they are. You know what I mean? Because it's a romance.
And because was written in the actual Regency period, they talk about meeting the guy for like 500 pages.
A long time. Yeah. It's slower. It's slower than, but
slower.
It's got to be a little faster. It's got to be a little faster. Okay. And then catalyst for her is when the original world is when she and her sisters talked about men in a theoretical sense. And then the new world is when she actually has real relationships. Jane is having a real relationship with Mr. Bingley, and it seems to be romantic. She is having a real relationship with Mr. Darcy and later Mr. Wickham, and it seems to be very contentious in the one and maybe romantic in the other and whatever. But once it's not theoretical anymore, that is Act 2. Okay, so now we're going to interview Charlie. Finally. So I was curious about this. This is where we were. It wasn't recording, but this is where we were. So okay, so you go to BYU.
Yes.
And you wrote, how many manuscripts had you written by the time you were like, didn't you write tons? Didn't you write like a whole manuscript when you were like 16 or something?
Oh, I didn't finish the book till I was 19.
Oh, well, 19. Yeah. So
it was my first book I finished when I was 19.
And so when did you get it? Were you pretty serious about it? Did you want to be an author when you were like 19?
Yes.
Okay. So then you went to BYU and you
majored in English. Don't do that unless you want to write literary, everybody.
Why do you say don't do that?
Well, because I'm a fantasy writer,
right?
So for me, majoring in something like history or anthropology or sociology, things that would really stem more ideas and give me more knowledge, would have been way better for me than reading, classics and writing boring essays on them.
Oh, interesting.
So unless you want to write literary, don't think that if you want to be a writer, you have to major in English.
Right.
That's a joke. You also don't have to major in creative writing unless you suck at writing. Maybe you should.
But did you feel like it gave you a lot of links into? I mean, did you feel like you knew how to write a query letter and do all of that? I mean, I went to conferences.
Oh no, but BYU didn't teach me how to do that. The internet did.
Oh, interesting. Did you go to any conferences beforehand?
Yeah, I went to. Well, the first conference I went to was LTW, which BYU was held at that point in time.
Yeah.
So LTW was through all that. I didn't go to any others until after I graduated.
Okay. And then, so you've written several manuscripts. Did you query any before the Paper Magician?
Yes.
And so you did the whole query rejection whole thing, and that was probably not very fun.
No.
But you just kept writing.
Yes.
Because that's awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then so you queried and
queried. And that's how I got my agent. I cold queried. I don't have any cool stories, guys.
Right.
Just keep going and you'll wear them down eventually. And then they'll have to represent the book that they previously rejected.
Did she do that?
Yeah, Followed by Frost was rejected by Marlene.
That's totally awesome.
Take that, Marlene. Don't watch this. I'm sorry, I love you.
The last laugh. That's totally awesome. So when she read it the second time, was she more cool with it, or did you even tell her?
It's funny to say more cool with it because it's about winter.
Very Frost.
She didn't say anything about it. She's just super professional. She's like, okay, I'll sell it.
You're like, okay, awesome. How many did you pitch her that you'd already
Just
queried?
That one.
Just that
one.
And everything else.
The second time I pitched her.
Everything else you had written post. So everything else that you've published, you wrote after you wrote this and got an agent, except for the one that's coming out.
Except for Followed by Frost, I wrote before.
And that's the one that's coming out.
Yes,
right.
September.
Woohoo!
September 22nd.
Yay!
Anybody in the Utah area, we're having a release party September 26th at 7 o'clock at the King's English.
Not that you need to write that down or anything, although you can, because I gave you space. Notes on Charlie's general awesomeness.
Myself.
That's totally awesome. Let me give you, I have questions actually. Okay. Oh yes, we talked about this, you and I, a little bit. Why, again, did we talk yet in this one why you wanted new chapters to be placed? Why did they want it to be a little thicker? So your first chapter, when she pitched it, is about the same as the first chapter.
Chapter 3 and chapter 4 are new.
But then she added extra chapters between the start and the catalyst.
Yeah, my editor asked me to add in 2 extra chapters, which usually you would think no, because that pushes the catalyst back, especially in a book that is so targeted towards youth.
Right.
But for him. So in the original manuscript, Sini and Emery know each other for about 3 days before the catalyst happens, when his heart gets ripped out. In this version, they know each other for about 3 weeks.
Right. And so I mean, once you have an editor, then you just follow the advice of your editor. But as a reader, I can see why that would be nice. I didn't know that when I read it, but I knew you said that they had added 2 chapters. So I was trying to figure out like which chapters which ones you had added. But it did feel, it's funny because as a reader and as an author, I would have wanted you to speed that up maybe.
Yeah.
But then as a reader,
I get mixed reviews on it.
I know.
I get mixed reviews on everything.
Exactly. At the end of the day, of course, you do whatever the professionals say, right? But not necessarily. Do whatever you want.
I accepted about 60% of my editor's edits.
And then you fought back?
Yeah, well, he wasn't like fighting me. I just was like,
did you already have approval?
What do you mean?
So sometimes you do like a revise and resubmit for your editor.
Well, he just gave me dev edits, developmental edits, and I just took about 60 to 70% of them, and I ignored the rest.
And then, but had you already been accepted for publication?
Yes.
See, did you already have a guarantee? See, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's different. Some people and editors do this quite a bit.
If you do like an R&R or something like that, then you should probably take all their suggestions.
You should probably do all the suggestions. But even then, I know people that don't, and they go on to
follow your heart.
Yeah, it's true. But don't have it ripped out of your body.
Don't have it ripped out of your body.
Magicians. Oh, that's awesome. So, but you felt comfortable adding the 2 chapters?
Yeah.
I felt like it did make the romance cuter.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, you have to know that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they don't get to interact as much later. Okay. So what does a premise mean to you?
Premise, what the book is about.
Oh yeah, but
the thing I said at the beginning of this, that was the premise.
So the pitch?
Yeah.
Is that like that's the same
That's
thing?
what I see a premise as being, yes.
Okay. Do you think genre matters with pacing?
Yes.
Like a lot?
Well, if I'm reading an adult, epic fantasy or a hard science fiction, I'm way more okay taking a long time to get into it than if I'm reading a contemporary romance.
If you see that it's a thick book and there are a lot of pages,
I read Brandon Sanderson. I get that all the time.
So does it read fast to you still, or do you care that it's going slower?
No, I mean, as long as it's still interesting.
As long as it's still interesting.
Like, what's Name of the Wind? The Name of the Wind would not have ever worked if it was anything but an epic fantasy, because nothing happens in that book till like page 110. You never would have gotten away with that. But percentage-wise, I guess, if you compare it to like other fiction, it still works.
Yeah, I guess so. Have you read Brothers Karamazov?
I have not.
Nothing happens until like page 100.
Yeah.
It's a murder mystery. It's the first murder mystery I've ever written. Like genre murder mystery.
Honestly, all worlds can be broken. If you can keep it interesting, do it. If not,
it's not interesting.
Don't start your book too early, guys. If nothing cool's happening in chapter 1, you're starting your book too early.
So now that we've done all that, we are going to talk about writing your first chapter. So you've got a first chapter that's written, and we keep telling you to make sure that you do something interesting kind of early. And I read a lot of submissions recently for a first chapter contest, and they were starting way too fast. And I was drinking from the fire hose. I didn't understand the original world enough, and I didn't understand the character enough to know what was wrong and what needed to be fixed. So all of a sudden they're like on a talking horse or something, or their sword explodes and fireworks go off, and I'm like, I have no idea what this means about their poignant feelings about their father or whatever.
It's normal.
Yeah, like I know it's not normal because they're acting like it's not normal. I mean, they're saying, wow, this is crazy, not normal. And so I get that it's not normal, but I'm like, I don't know you well enough to know what needs to change.
Why it matters.
Yeah.
That's what the depth is.
Exactly.
Happened, and here's all the bullet points under it of saying why it's important.
Right. Okay, so what I recommend when you start writing your book, you kind of probably have a sense of your original world and you have a sense of your new world. But when you show your original world, you have to show it in a way that's interesting enough that we don't set the book down. And I think that that is the tricky part. You want the original world to be interesting, and you want it to not last very many pages, maybe 3 to 10 pages, but it has to show some of what's wrong in the original world, and it has to show it in an interesting way. And it's best if you don't just write it on the page. Like, what's wrong is that I'm sad and I'm lonely. And 3 pages later, I meet this guy, and so it's obvious that I'm going to have this romance with him. Okay, it's best if you can use examples from the original world that feel like we're part of the original world, and that something in the original world is going on. Not so huge, that something can't be so huge that we can't follow it, but it has to be something enough that we can get a sense of what's important to the character and what's wrong with the world.
First chapter, thinking about what you're saying about, oh, I'm so lonely and stuff. The first chapter of the Mara Dyer series, the first book, The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer. It's good. Good. What she was just talking about. You know, boy, you're lonely, but it's subtle.
But yeah.
Vending machines.
Yeah, and then you brought a few books with you.
I did.
So you brought Couture and Lord Death. Now this one,
beautiful book.
This one has
very quick pace.
Yeah, very quick. Especially, I wouldn't say the whole thing is quick, but the
whole thing isn't. But the opening really
is quite quick. The opening is quite quick. So what do they do to help with depth, in your opinion, to make it feel real? They make it very vivid, and it usually gives a lot of details. Honestly, when I first read this book, I remember thinking I would slow this down. That's what I personally thought. But it does work. Did you know she wrote this as a short story? I did not know that. Yeah. I also just got it signed by her. Did you? You were so awesome. Yeah, she was a story maker. So this is Martine Levitt. I didn't even know she was Mormon. Did you know Martine Levitt is Mormon? So cool. Mormons write the best books. It's so true. And the best manuscripts. No, but like it's in first person, so it's a little telly because you can kind of get away with that. Right. Lucy just lays down like, this is what my life is like. This is what I was doing. It's just every day, and then I thought I saw this beautiful deer, and so I had to follow him into the forest. Right. And really, in like a paragraph, she gets lost in the forest and is near death. And by page 2, she meets death, and that's the catalyst of the story. Right. The thing I think that works well for Martine Levitt is that her images are very vivid. You feel like you're there. The language is really rich. It doesn't read like conversation. Strong character metaphor. Yeah, she does. She actually has objective. What's it called? I forget. Like, listen to this. Trees which had once seemed benign and beautiful to me blocked the sun, fell before my path, tore at my hair, and yielded no fruit but bitter leaves. So she makes the sentences on the sentence level very beautiful. She doesn't just say there were some trees and I was really scared, and the trees are tearing at her hair and yielding no fruit and having bitter leaves, which gives you a sense of her emotional state, but it uses the objects to show her emotional state rather than, in fact, I'm sure Martine can give us all this advice on it, but she talks about how, I don't know if she uses the forest per se, but she may have. The forest will give us a sense of Coutura's inner feelings. If the forest is friendly, then Coutura's inner feelings are peaceful. If the forest is harsh and coming after her, then her inner feelings are equally tormented. Yeah, you can think of it this way. So if you have 2 characters walking into a dirty kitchen, okay, you can show a lot by having a character come in and being so frustrated that it's a mess and focusing on the dirty dishes and the cockroaches on the floor. Or you can have a character coming in and thinking, oh, the dishes aren't done, my husband's not home yet, or focusing on her kids' drawings on the refrigerator, or just what you focus on and your reactions to that can add a lot of depth, not only to character, but in your setup for the story. I'm going to send you on the very last page of the notes. I have an entire huge list here. NikkiTriumphant.com. I have a huge list here of topics, and I'm going to put this up. These aren't topics that you have to have. These are just topics that you might have. And the more depth you want your story to have, the more topics you're going to have. It's okay to not have very many topics. But if you in your mind are thinking that these topics are going to be covered, but they're not actually mentioned in chapter 1, because you're trying to start with a bang, you're trying to start with some action that's more interesting, you're going to actually lose your reader. And when you start bringing up these topics, they're going to be a little bit confused or feel a little bit cheated or feel like it's random. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so yours is pretty, your list is probably fairly limited. She's got sense of self and
I like
some
to not
romance
cry
stuff.
when I write.
Right. Well, Hunger Games is actually pretty complex, which is why it's longer, and it deals with, like, they're killing each other and they're young.
Sometimes.
Right. But so in Hunger Games, these are the things that not themes necessarily, but the depth that she shows. She shows her thoughts about survival, her economic standing, her social status, the memories of her most lonely or desperate times, her animosity toward another character, her mom, her sense of loyalty toward her sister, worrying about the fate of a romantic interest. That would be Gale, like if his name's going to be chosen. Her morals, her sense of personality and who she is. She feels like she's a loner. She doesn't have a lot of friends. She's very pragmatic. And then her physical characteristics are mentioned. And so that's quite a list, especially for an action story, you know, and I said this in a previous one, but Hunger Games could have started out like, she could have been like running for her life and like shooting arrows, because it has a lot of that later, but they actually started at a pretty calm spot so that we could really get to know the original world and what things about it were broken. And a lot of the things about it that are broken have to do with these topics. And so if there were fewer topics mentioned, then she wouldn't have as much depth, which is okay, but you can't show as much growth. And so I think a lot of times when I'm reading a first chapter by a writer who isn't as experienced, the amount of depth that they give their character is not enough for me, or the world isn't in depth enough. You don't have a lot of like topics that you cover, but your world is very rich.
Oh, thank you.
You have you have even like folding the paper seems like extra cool in your world. Do you know what I mean? And you use a lot of rich dialogue, and you don't just say things. You don't. I'm just trying to.
Continue telling everybody why my books so great.
Well, I'm trying to. You don't have to have a lot of depth to make your book cool, but something has to have depth. In other words, it doesn't have to be your character. It can be your world, or it can be your premise, or it can be, but something has to have it, or else we don't get enough of why we need to read the book and why we need to care.
The character probably should have depth, though.
Not always. James Bond doesn't have a lot of depth.
That's true.
And I always go back to that. True, but I think there are books out there where the main character doesn't really have that much depth, and you're like Maze Runner. That guy doesn't have a lot of depth. He basically is like, I don't know who I am. Let's go run in a maze. Like that's it.
Well, it's because he doesn't remember.
Sure, but we don't care. We don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't have to.
Like, we want to see the maze. Go in the maze.
Yeah, we're just like, go, let's do it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But then he has this cool premise, and he has a cool.
The setting.
The setting is super cool, yeah, and the way the maze moves, and we feel like we can see it, which is why it made a fun movie. You know what I mean? And so it can be, but choose something and be aware of what you're choosing, and make sure it's getting on the page, and make sure it's happening before any major changes are happening, like that you're on a horse and then it suddenly morphs into a tank. Don't do that in the first paragraph unless you're somehow going to be able to backtrack a little bit. What was that one you said where he woke up and he...
Oh, where the catalyst is the very first line.
Yeah, yes.
That is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. The first line is something like, I think his name's Riordan. Riordan woke up having no idea he was damned for eternity.
Then does it back up a little bit?
Well, yeah, because like he wakes up and like realizes he has this disease, and while he's realizing it, you get, you know, the narrative and the thoughts that show like this is what the disease is, this is what the disease means, and then he gets thrown to the disease city. Got it.
Yeah. So you do get enough. So you do get shown the original world, but you're told right at the beginning that something.
The other thing with Elantris though is that you have 3 viewpoints.
Oh,
and so if you want to see the regular world, when you jump into the next viewpoint, you see what it's like.
Oh, interesting.
So
interesting. I guess maybe you don't have to put the original world as the first paragraph. It sounds like, I mean, he's changed it up.
All rules in writing can be broken.
Right.
So,
but it does need to be there eventually at some point. I noticed.
You need to know, yeah.
Yeah, as a reader of some not just some more novice writing, that was the thing that I noticed the most, is that action could be told with clarity. I knew what was going on. I mean, all this action is happening, and the whole time I'm just like, where are we going with this? Who were we before, and who do we want to be now? You know, whole battles were taking place. Civilizations were being destroyed, and I was like, is this good or bad? I don't know where I'm going with it. Okay, so what I recommend that you do is take your first chapter after you've written it and take a list of topics. You can make up your own. These are just suggestions. And then get out your pens and your papers, and we're going to do just a little exercise here. Okay, first pass. You're going to read your first chapter. You're going to have your topics in hand, and you're going to put a check mark all of the topics that you want to be in your book by the end of it. So if you see survival as one of the topics that you want, so yours would have survival.
Kind of.
Yeah, well, she needs to survive.
Roll through.
I mean, she doesn't want the girl to kill her.
Oh,
does that make sense?
That's not the first chapter.
But it's not in the first chapter, and that's okay. So for yours, survival isn't in the first chapter.
No.
Okay, so you would skip that one, even though it's on the main list of what you, well, actually, no, sorry, you would put a check mark on that because you see it as being in the book. Okay, and so what about yours? Economic standing? Her economic standing is mentioned in yours.
It is.
Okay. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. Social standing? A little bit. Memories of her most lonely or desperate times?
Yes.
That's definitely in the book somewhere.
She has a photographic memory.
Right. Her sense of loyalty to a third party? She has that too.
Well, I mean, you can almost count it as things.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. Anyway, but now we're going to go through again. Once you've gone through the original list, you write down all the ones that you want in the book total. And then you're going to go through just the first chapter, and you're going to circle the ones that actually appear in the first chapter. Okay, so survival for you? There's no sense. There's absolutely no sense that her survival is in question at all. Economic standing?
Yes.
A little bit, yep. I should have done this twice. I should have had one for you and one for me. Social standing, a little bit.
A little bit.
I mean, we kind of, especially in Edwardian, whatever, England, you know. Memories of her most lonely or desperate time? You sort of hint that there is. So that counts. If you hint that something exists, like even if you just say, oh, she remembered that was before he left or something like that, you know, you're hinting that there's this awful epic romance that ended badly, you know, that counts. Animosity toward another character?
Yes. That's towards Thane.
Oh yeah, Dad. I'm such a dork. Okay, yeah.
That's like the whole first chapter of animosity.
And her animosity toward like her situation.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Much.
Right. So again, we don't have to go through the whole thing. And then this is the key though, I think, to making your book come off the pages and come alive a little bit. Take your highlighter or your marker so it shows up a little bit better. And I want you to read your chapter. So we're gonna do this. We're gonna read it a little bit, just a little bit.
This is awkward.
We don't have to read the entire thing. You're going to write down, you're going to only highlight something if it both shows up in your first chapter and it's in either dialogue or stage direction. Okay? So I'm going to read some of the dialogue. Some of the dialogue is just not enough. Yeah, not enough.
To write in a book.
Paper is a wonderful medium and one that's lost credit in recent years. With only 12 active magicians left in that discipline, we have no choice but to direct a portion of our apprentices that way. I'm sorry.
Oh, you just started on dialogue?
Yeah, I'm just doing dialogue. Because that's all that counts. So what would you, that doesn't really do, that kind of sets up a plot point. Yes. Well, that's her hopes and futures though.
There you go.
Okay.
Hopes and futures is true.
Okay. Where is it that she says the theme? I like it when she says her first line of dialogue is, I've been shot to hell.
It's right here.
Oh, I see. And then right there. Okay. So she says, I've been shot to hell, but that definitely gives us a sense of her personality and her sense of self. Okay? She's kind of funny. She's definitely willing to state what's on her mind. You know what I mean?
My book.
I'm so sorry. I'll only do one more. And then never trust what your eyes see at a magician's house. Miss Twill, you know that. Okay, so then that actually gives us the theme. But you get the idea. You go through and you tell us only you only highlight something if it shows up in dialogue or stage direction. So I'll actually do a tiny bit from mine. So the first line of dialogue is don't define beauty too narrowly, which is that's a lot about the theme. And then the train whistle blows, drowning out the conductor's final boarding call. That would be like a line of I can't talk. That would be like a stage direction. You would have to note that, okay? But if you've set it up well, if the train whistle is shrill, then you can add that. You can highlight something here about her emotional state if you've set up the setting to be reflective of her emotional state. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so her emotional state is that she's very excited. So everything that's happening is fun and exciting. And so we don't have the shrill train whistle, anything. We have just the whistle blowing, and we have final boarding call to all passengers, fan club members, and associates in Argentinian actor singer Emilio Baldoni Marasa's personal entourage, of which there appear to be dozens. They wear headsets, stride purposefully, and speak rapid Spanish. So she's like really enamored with this whole rock star Spanish telenovela world. And she has won this ticket where she's going to be able to go on this concert tour with her favorite actor.
Aww.
Yes. And then she is accused of sabotaging him, and she's exiled from the train.
That's great.
Yeah, so then she has to sneak back on the train, and she has to clear her name and preserve her epic first meeting moment, because she's sure that he's her epic love, and that they're going to have this epic romance. Anyway, so anything that is highlighted is going to be more interesting to your reader than anything that's not highlighted. Okay, so go through as you read it and see how much you could put into dialogue, or how much you can use the stage direction to hint at the things that you want to be highlighted, if that makes sense. And so this is all in the original world to make your original world interesting, and to have it deal with the theme that you need to have fixed by the end. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to say.
I just have one extra thing to say. So I know that a lot of you guys probably have heard about in media res, about why it's important like to start mid-action to like draw the reader in. And what we've been talking about is totally anti in media res. The problems that we have with in media res are that when you start in the middle of the action, in the middle of the conflict, we don't know the character, especially the character. We don't know the setting, and so we don't care about them as much. So in media res obviously works. That's why it exists. But if you're going to do that, make it a conflict or an action that you can tie in your character's personality, where you can tie in depth to them. And so while the action is happening, we are also simultaneously learning about the character and about the world, so we can care about them. So if you wanted to do in media res, if that's what you want your opening action, your opening scene to just be that fast-paced action. Just make sure that you're including those things in there too.
Right. And also in media res doesn't necessarily mean, I think that means you don't start with like their birth the way they used to in like David Copperfield. I mean, the guy literally is born.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's really boring. It's boring for a long time until he's at least 8, and even then it's kind of boring until he's like 12. So it's a long story, you know? But sometimes in media res means start with something happening, but it doesn't have to be the major, for example, if you have an action scene, it might be an action scene that mirrors a later action scene that's more significant, but it in and of itself is showing you actually a regular part of the person's world. So it might be like a police officer in a regular car chase, where it's very action-filled, it's very interesting.
But for him, it's commonplace.
But for him, it's kind of more normal. And then we get a sense of what's a little bit wrong, like maybe he and the partner aren't seeing eye to eye, or we can see that his job is in question.
Maybe this time he's been forced to drive a Chevy.
and it was just epically bad. You know what I mean? Or maybe it goes badly and he turns in his badge, you know, because he's so sick of it going badly or whatever. But we see that something is going to throw him into a new version. Of course, he's still going to be doing car chases. It's just going to be with a little bit of a different twist than what he had before. Before he was just a regular police officer. Now he works privately for the President of the United States, and he's only, you know, whatever.
Wow, all in the first chapter.
No,
I'm kidding.
not all in the first chapter. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Charlie, and I'm so sorry, everyone, that we mixed up and that I accidentally deleted that other one. But thank you so much for coming. And we do have I usually raffle off a free critique, but we don't have anyone on our chat today. I think I may have scared them away. So we're so sorry about that. But you can, hopefully you're watching this later and we will get you an email for the next one. And then you can join the contest for that. Okay, thanks so much. Have a good one, you guys.